My name is Amy Carter. I'm 65 years old, a widow, and for most of my life, my greatest pride was my only son, Daniel. I worked endless hours cleaning offices and houses after my husband died, sacrificing everything so Daniel could finish college and build a better future. Every struggle felt worthwhile because I believed family always stayed together. Everything changed after Daniel married Valerie and moved to New York. At first, he promised nothing would come between us, but his calls became shorter, his visits stopped, and I slowly became an afterthought. Whenever I asked to visit, there was always an excuse. They were busy, settling in, or planning something. I convinced myself that newlyweds simply needed time. Then Daniel called with wonderful news. Valerie was pregnant. I cried with happiness, believing this baby would bring our family close again. I knitted blankets, tiny hats, and baby clothes with all the love a grandmother could give. I sent gifts, wrote heartfelt cards, and messaged Valerie often, but she never replied. She read every message and ignored everyone. I watched her pregnancy through Facebook while her own mother stood beside her at every appointment. When my grandson Matthew was born, I didn't receive a phone call. I discovered his birth through a Facebook post while cleaning floors at work. Looking at his tiny face on my phone instead of holding him in my arms broke something inside me. Daniel apologized, but only after I confronted him. Even then, he refused to let me visit because Valerie needed space. Weeks later, I begged one last time. Daniel finally agreed to let me come for a single day. I traveled 12 exhausting hours by bus carrying gifts, another handmade blanket, and hoped that everything would finally change. Instead, I spent 2 uncomfortable hours sitting beside strangers who happened to be my own family. Valerie barely spoke to me. Daniel hardly looked up from his phone. I held Matthew for only 5 precious minutes before they sent me back home. On the long ride home, I realized I had spent years begging for a place in my own son's life. A few days later, my phone rang. It was the hospital. Daniel had listed my number as the emergency contact for a $10,000 hospital bill. Suddenly, everything made sense. They didn't need my love or my presence. They needed my money. For the first time in my life, I chose myself. I calmly told the hospital they had the wrong person and that I had no family there. When Daniel discovered I refused to pay, he flooded my phone with angry messages, calling me selfish and accusing me of abandoning him. He claimed family should always help each other, yet he had forgotten what family truly meant. Instead of arguing, I sent one final email. I told him I loved him, but love without respect becomes pain. I reminded him that I had begged only for a place in his life, never for his money. I wished him happiness, but refused to sacrifice my dignity again. Months passed in complete silence. I stopped checking Facebook. I returned to my knitting classes, spent time with my best friend Rosa, and slowly rebuilt a peaceful life. For the first time, my happiness no longer depended on whether my son remembered I existed. Nearly 2 years later, another unexpected phone call changed everything. Valerie had suffered a severe mental breakdown caused by depression and overwhelming stress. Daniel had lost his job, their finances had collapsed, and social services needed someone to care for little Matthew. This time I didn't travel because I was begging to be loved. I traveled because an innocent child needed his grandmother. When I arrived, Daniel looked exhausted. The confident man who once pushed me away broke down in tears and apologized. He admitted he had chosen convenience over family and allowed his wife to isolate everyone who cared about them. Then I met Matthew again. The little boy smiled shyly before wrapping his tiny arms around my legs. In that quiet moment, years of heartbreak began to heal. While Valerie received treatment, I cared for Matthew. Slowly, honest conversations replaced silence. Valerie admitted her own childhood had filled her with fear and insecurity, causing her to see me as a threat instead of family. Daniel accepted responsibility for every decision that had hurt me. Forgiveness wasn't instant, but it was real. Over time, Daniel found steady work, Valerie continued therapy, and our family learned something none of us had understood before. Love cannot survive without respect, and boundaries are not punishment. They are protection. Today, Matthew runs into my arms every time he sees me, shouting, "Grandma Amy!" Daniel calls every week, not because he needs something, but because he genuinely wants to hear my voice. Valerie and I may never be best friends, but we respect one another, and sometimes that's enough. Looking back, I realized the greatest lesson wasn't about becoming a grandmother. It was about becoming someone who finally valued herself. I learned that saying no doesn't make you selfish. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel. Sometimes the strongest act of love is refusing to let others treat you as if your only value is what you can give them. In the end, I didn't lose my family. I found myself, and once I did, my family finally found its way back to me.